In baseball, there's wisdom that's been passed down over the years. Bunt the runner over, steal bases, play for one run at a time, trust the book. Earl Weaver thought the book was wrong. Not on the edges, wrong at the foundation. And for 15 years managing the Baltimore Orioles, he proved it. His formula was simple and almost contemptuous in its confidence. Pitching, defense, and the 3-run dinger. Don't grind for one run at a time, wait for the big swing, while the other manager's bunting, stealing, praying for contact, you're already 4 ahead. He was doing analytics before analytics had a name. Before there was Billy Beane, before Moneyball, before every front office in baseball had statistics departments, Earl Weaver had index cards and his theories. He also had a hair-trigger temper, a cigarette seemingly welded to his mouth, and an unusual talent for getting himself ejected from games he was already winning. The book is called The Last Manager by John W. Miller, How Earl Weaver Tricked, Tormented, and Reinvented Baseball. If you're watching this, you're likely a fan of the game of baseball. In a lot of ways, to read this, you kind of would need to be, nowadays, right, we're talking over 40 years later from when Earl Weaver basically retired. He's not a big household name, but at the time, and this is sort of part of what the book is about, is the manager in baseball used to be the celebrity of the team, particularly baseball as America's pastime, right? Nowadays, baseball is certainly not the most popular sport. When you think about in America, it's going to be definitely football and potentially even the NBA after that. Baseball was America's pastime. Everybody played baseball. Baseball was the main attraction when you went to your town, and that included minor league games. And so this book it's titled The Last Manager because that's kind of the idea here is that it was the beginning of the end when managers were no longer the dictator of the whole team. So in this era of baseball, when Earl Weaver grew up, it was just on the cusp of no free agency. So at the tail end of his career, and they get into this, they talked about how Earl navigated the free agency period of baseball. But this was when the managers were still ruling the team with that iron fist. And so I'll read a quote. There's actually one that kind of helps define this in the book, and it just explains the eras a bit here. And here's what it says. It says, you can divide the history of baseball manager into 5 phases. Captain, the 19th century. Teacher, the early 20th century. The general, mid-20s. The strategist, the late 20th. And CEO, 21st centuries. The 1970s, the age of the strategist, that was Earl Weaver's time. So you were still running the whole team, the whole org, you were the show. And that's what makes this book fun and cool and nostalgic for someone who, like me, who grew up watching baseball and loving the game of baseball. It's these kind of throwbacks in managers. So the book is the story of Earl Weaver. It's his biography. He didn't participate in it, to my knowledge, but the author went and interviewed tons of people, including family members, to get it. He's a baseball lifer. He grew up in baseball. He played baseball in Missouri. I think grew up in the St. Louis area. He was a huge Stan Musial fan. And like a lot of kids at that time, he got to the minor leagues. Back then, the minor leagues was a lot different than it is today. So the minor leagues was, baseball was just collecting as many people as you could. And because you had so much control over the fact that they couldn't switch teams, there was no agents or anything like that, you would just collect all these players and eventually some of them would hit. The minor leagues was a big attraction at this time, including for local cities, right? People it was a big ticket. You would want to go to minor league baseball games because back then there wasn't a lot else to do. So he makes his way through the minor leagues. Eventually he gets to spring training. He's about to make a major league ball club. He's on the cusp of doing that, and he doesn't make it. He gets sent down, and from there, his baseball career is misery. He ends up developing a drinking habit. Like a lot of players, if you grew up playing baseball, you know what this is like. Trying to get into the big leagues it's just you're driving from one small city to another, all over middle America, not making much money. And so Earl Weaver eventually gets into coaching, and eventually, right, to sum it all up, he becomes the manager of the Baltimore Orioles. And what he eventually is known for is his temper. Not just winning games, I should say, but his temper as well. If more modern day would be, and this isn't obviously too modern nowadays because they don't really exist, but kind of my time would be more like Lou Piniella or Bobby Cox. Bobby Cox, I believe, is actually the manager with the most ejections in history, but Earl Weaver has the highest ejection percentage. It's like this percentage where the number of games managed with 1,000 wins or more, Earl has the most ejections. I think it's like 92 ejections. And these ejections become the stuff of lore and fame. I mean, they're, in today's age, in the era of YouTube and TikTok, like it would be, he probably first would be canceled. But that's what kind of became part of the show for fans, is they wanted to see what Earl would do. And you can get away with that if you're winning ball games. And Earl sure did that, right? He was on the cutting edge of what nowadays is considered table stakes, right? He was the first guy that would be telling you, no, why would we bunt? Why would we give up an out? Why are we trying to hit a sacrifice fly? Why don't we just try to hit a home run? Examples like that. Pitching. He was all about pitching and defense, right? And he had something like the top 3 or 4 defenses statistically ever, right? And it's, some of it was probably luck, right? You couldn't have a lot of player movement back then, but at the tail end there was free agency. But he just preached things, and it worked. The other thing that I liked about Earl Weaver, and I, by the way, did not know much about him at all prior to reading this book. The other thing that I liked about him was just what I would consider to be like a throwback manager, throwback leadership style. It gets confused a little bit when, and I compare this to like a Bill Parcells or a Bill Belichick, kind of the old school. If you think about college basketball, it'd be like a Mike Krzyzewski. Some of these old school guys who are considered the autocrats, hard ass kind of guys, but deep down they're teddy bears when it comes to their players. They love these guys. Greg Popovich is another example of this, where on the outside he's a hard ass, and I'm sure he is, right? He has high standards. Earl Weaver was like that too, but he loved his players, and he became beloved in the clubhouse. They talk a lot about how Earl was so self-deprecating that he sort of became the enemy for the players, and I say that kind of air quote wise. When things weren't going well, the players could just make fun of Earl. Like, he became their target of their anger, but in a good way. And Earl was okay with that as long as they were winning ball games. And I don't know, it takes me back to a different time. I do want to read one last quote here because this is something that I really liked. It says, "Managing is like holding a dove in your hand. If you hold it too tightly, you kill it, but if you hold it too loosely, you lose it." The quote's from the book, but it's from Tommy Lasorda, famed Dodgers manager, Hall of Famer himself. That really does sum up not only managing baseball players, managing people in general, but Earl Weaver as well. He talked a lot about how he couldn't get too close to his players. One of his big things is that he never made promises to anyone when it came to players, because that way he could never break them. He just would never make a promise. And there's a lot that you can learn from that. So I really liked this book. It's a throwback book for sure. Obviously a bit of a niche. I think you've got to be a fan of baseball and probably a little bit of that era. But if you're someone like me who I wasn't even born when he retired. But I sort of, like I said, grew up on the Lou Pinellas, the Bobby Coxes. I enjoyed that period of time where the manager was still part of the show, part of the reason why you went to the games. Some of these crazy ejections, very quotable. It was nostalgic for me in that sense. So that's The Last Manager, How Earl Weaver Tricked, Tormented, and Reinvented Baseball by John W. Miller. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. And I'll see you in the comments if you have any questions. Thanks.